Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Benchwarmers Sports Talk podcast. And as promised, we have the big one today. We have the NHL playoffs preview episode. So today we're going to go through, break down every single one of the first round matchups, and then talk about who we think could go on a deep run, eventually talking about who we think are going to make it to out of their divisions into the Final Four, and then eventually who we think will win the Stanley Cup. As always, I'm Labi, and I'm joined here by Jacob. Jacob, how you doing today?
It's a pleasure, man. I'm glad to be here. Glad to be talking some good old hockey playoffs. It's for any hockey fan, as you being one yourself, it's the most wonderful time of year. It's postseason, baby.
Absolutely. I think, start of the season, start of the regular season, start of the playoffs, two of the most exciting times. For the playoffs, especially, some of the most nervous times as a fan. And if you're a fan of one of the 16 teams who qualified for the playoffs, well, then good luck to your team. And if you're a fan of one of the teams who did not make the playoffs, well, hopefully by the end of the episode today, you'll be able to pick a team to cheer for this year. Obviously, as a Penguins fan, I haven't had to do that so far. Subtle nudge at our 15-year playoff streak. But yeah, just very subtle nudge, very subtle nudge. So let's get right into it. What division you want to start with?
Let's start with the East because that's your Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll end with the North just because we're here and it's we can go and talk about that a lot. Let's start with the East, Lobby. Take it away.
All right, so the East Division, the Penguins winning the division. Washington finishing in the runner-up spot. So Washington will play Boston, who qualifies the 3 seed, and the New York Islanders go in as the number 4 seed. Then there was actually, a pretty significant gap afterwards. Not that we're going to talk about the non-playoff teams, but, obviously the Rangers and the Flyers, two teams who really thought that they are two teams where at least the organization thought that they would be playoff teams. I think that was very much reflected with the Rangers basically firing everybody, including their head coach as well. But yeah, let's focus on the teams that did make the playoffs, and let's start. I guess not to start with the Penguins because of bias, but since you chose the East, we'll start with the 1v4 matchup for every division. And so that's the 1 seed Penguins taking on the 4 seed Islanders. So Penguins, Islanders, who wins in how many games and why? Let's
Well,
start.
the Penguins are winning that series, and I think it's going to be in a 5-game uh, challenge. Barry Trotz, we all know his system is effective, it works, but once you figure it out and you find little cracks in the flaws, then, after that, I don't want to say it's easy to kind of go out, and figure it out, but once you figure it out, then, you can have a much easier time. And I think if we look back at the Penguins' successes this year, a lot of it has gone to Sidney Crosby playing out of his mind with everyone on that team. And I just don't see how the Penguins lose this. Mike Sullivan has coached this team when everyone thought they were not going to get it. Like everyone thought at the beginning of the season, I thought the Penguins weren't going to do very well. I had them making the playoffs, just not winning the division. Tristan Jarry, Casey DeSmith, one of the most underrated duos in the league right now. And it's just Malkin's coming back. The defense has been there. And I got nothing negative to say about Pittsburgh. Obviously credit to the Flyers, but after what happened in 2019, I don't think that the Penguins want another sweep, and I don't think they're going to allow it.
Yeah, I mean, to start, I'm not going to sit here and say I don't see how the Penguins couldn't win because I want to give respect to the Islanders, to the talent that they have, to the system that they play. This was a team that was very much in the fight to win the division entirely. So as a Penguins fan, I'm coming into this series expecting to win the series, but I'm cautious still because I know how good the Islanders can be. And based on that 2019 series, now that was a very different Pittsburgh team, that was a very different New York team. So I don't think we should take any narratives away from that series other than, if you don't play up to your standard, if you disrespect the Islanders, if you just walk in assuming it's going to be an easy win, then they'll absolutely wipe the floor with you. But like you said, I think Pittsburgh's aware of that, and they definitely don't want to get embarrassed after 2 straight years of first round eliminations, or even earlier than first round elimination, than the qualifier round elimination in Montreal last year. They're going to want to turn that around. I also had Pittsburgh in 5. But not to sound boring and replicate, I was going between Pittsburgh in 5 and Pittsburgh in 6. So I guess I'll say Pittsburgh in 6 then, since you said Pittsburgh in 5. Just because I think the Islanders are good enough defensively to steal a game. They're very good on home ice, where I think they could potentially even win 2. The reason I was leaning Penguins in 5 is because with Pittsburgh on home ice, I think that if they win game 1, 2, and 5 at home, they just need a split away, and that'll be the series in 5. But like you said, I mean, I think offensively Pittsburgh clearly has the edge. The Islanders, as an offensive team, especially missing Anders Lee, are more of a balanced sort of team in terms of they want production from all 4 of their lines. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's certainly a very effective way, especially in the playoffs. Depth scoring is huge. I think the problem with the team that they're matched up against is the Penguins also have 4 consistent lines that can all score. And obviously Crosby's first line, Malkin's second line have much better top-end talent than the Islanders have, especially with them missing Anders Lee. And Palmieri hasn't really fit in well with the trade that the Islanders made. Meanwhile, Jeff Carter has 9 goals in 14 games as a Penguin, so it's safe to say that trade's working out so far. So offensively, Pittsburgh has a huge advantage. Defensively, I think the Islanders are certainly a lot better. I mean, speaking of underrated players, you were talking about the goaltending of Pittsburgh. I think that first Islanders pairing of Pulock and Pelech are 2 of the most underrated defensemen in the NHL, just because individually they don't stand out, but as a defensive pairing, they're one of the most solid defensive partnerships in the league. I at least think. But the Penguins are certainly not a slouch defensively. For whatever reason, Matheson and Ceci as a third pairing defense partnership works and has worked really well this year. I don't know how, but for whatever reason, Ceci and Matheson has been solid. And so the Penguins defensively are actually in an all right position, where I still think the Islanders get the edge, but it's a much more narrow edge. And I think I can say the same thing for goaltending, because although Varlamov is undoubtedly a much better goalie than Jari, he's got some injury issues right now, and some concerns with his injury as he left the Islanders' last game of the season. And, even assuming he is able to start in game 1, obviously you don't know what kind of lasting effects. Although, granted, same thing is true with Pittsburgh. Both of their goalies, DeSmith and Jari, missed the last game of the season due to injury. And so because of that, I think goaltending is a much more of a toss-up in this series than any other series, just because we don't know who's going to start, and we don't know who's fully healthy. And so because of that, based on everything that I know, I think the Penguins have the edge. And, obviously the Penguins on home ice this year have been phenomenal. They'll have home ice advantage. I think it's more a question of, can the Penguins get this done, not easily, but can they get this done in an efficient manner? Or are they going to get dragged to a 6th or 7th game? Are they going to get dragged into games going to overtime? Are they going to get frustrated with that system that the Islanders play in terms of being able to connect this first round into a cup run? That's really where my big concern is with this series as a Penguins fan. Because I think if we get this series done in 5 games, it will allow us to go into the second round with a lot of confidence. But yeah, I have the Penguins in 5, but I'll say 6 just to be different from you.
Fair enough. We got the second one in that division, the Boston Bruins and the Washington Capitals. This one's actually going to be quite an interesting series, I believe. They were chippy the entire series in the regular season, and it'll be the first time Chara is playing against another team, trying to knock out the Boston Bruins. So, who wins? How many games? And why?
So this one's very interesting. The season series went 4 games each. But it is worth mentioning that 2 of Washington's wins were overtime or shootout wins, where all 4 of Boston's wins were in regulation. Boston is coming into this series arguably the hottest team in hockey, with their record over the last 15, even 20 games. Taylor Hall went from not being able, like, couldn't hit a barn door with his shot in Buffalo to is scoring like every time he shoots the puck now in Boston somehow. And the Bruins are coming in feeling real good. The Capitals, on the other hand, they're coming into this series really banged up and bruised. You have Ovechkin, Oshie, Backstrom, Carlson, and Tom Wilson have all missed games due to injury in the last week of the season. So there are question marks about how healthy they're going to be. And granted, everyone at this stage is dealing with injuries, but those are 5 of the best players on this team. And the Capitals aren't going to be going very far if Ovechkin, Backstrom, Carlson aren't playing, and they're not going to go very far if they're not at 100%, and especially against a very good team like Boston. I'm obviously, as a Penguins fan, I'm hoping this series goes 7 games, and I'm hoping they just absolutely ruin each other. This is going to be an old school hockey physical series, because if you were to ask people, name a team that can respond to like the bullshit that Tom Wilson does, your number one answer would be Boston. Like, they're not going to take any shit from the Washington Capitals, and they will fight fire with fire in terms of like roughness. I think this is going to be one of those old school playoff series that actually do have fights and a lot of penalty minutes. And I think that might actually go against Boston, because I think Boston could actually comfortably win this series in like 5 games, just given the momentum coming in. And I think Washington will try to feed into that sort of rough, grinding, fighting sort of style. And I think that might actually work against Boston, and Washington will extend the series. I have Boston winning this series. I have them winning in... I initially said 7, but now I'm leaning more towards 6. I'll say Boston in 6.
I agree with a lot of what you said. However, I don't know. I think Washington has better offense, better scoring. Obviously, they have guys like Tom Wilson out there doing garbage shit. But you're right. Boston could comfortably win this in 5. They could even sweep them if they don't fall into the Capitals' plan. However, like you said, the Capitals are probably going to piss Boston off to the point where Boston's going to take some stupid penalties. Marchand, I can see taking a game-costing penalty. So they got to be careful about that, because if they want to win, they got to look at the bigger picture and be like, okay, listen, he got slashed, he got a penalty. There's no need to retaliate, but knowing Boston, there will be. Tuukka Rask is better than both Vanacek and Samsonov. And then they have Halak in the back. He's kind of been going down. The only problem I have with Boston right now is one of their top scorers, David Pastrnak. Have you heard of that guy? 4 goals in his last 21 games. That's not what you want for your starting, basically one of your starting lines, one of the more deadlier players in the NHL. So if he continues that cold trend, I can see Boston really in trouble. And I still think Boston will win the series, maybe in 6 or 7. You're right, a 7-game series between these two would be very, very fun to watch. It'd be great to watch for sure. Boston needs to figure that out. They need to get that first line. Marchand and Bergeron have been absolutely great this entire season. It kind of pains me to say that, but they've been really good through their entire career. But Pasternak's really got to figure that out, because he's one of the key factors to Boston's success. So I'm going to go Boston in 6. Would love to see it go to 7.
There you go. And actually, before we switch divisions, since we actually have the same teams going forward, this will actually be pretty easy. Then between Pittsburgh and Boston, who do you have coming out of the East?
I'm going to go Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh has a good chance of making it back to the playoffs. It's just, we'll get to it later, is who's going to come out of the North and challenge them, and we'll get to that later, obviously.
Yeah, no, definitely. I just wanted to ask, starting now with the East, I also have Pittsburgh. I'm sure that's very obvious to everyone listening that I would, have faith in my own team. But I think there are a lot of logical reasons for it. I mean, I think that this is definitely, I'm not going to sit here and say that this is the last year that Crosby and Malkin can go on a cup run, but people are definitely recognizing that this is a legitimate chance for them. And, obviously they're now 34 and 35 years old. So, you don't want to, you don't want to give away good opportunities like this, and the team is playing really well. The other thing is, I think that the Washington Capitals will, cause the Bruins more of a struggle in the first round, and so I think Pittsburgh will be a fresher team in that second round than Boston will be. Especially, like I said, if the Penguins can get that Islanders series done in 5 games. Obviously, you have to grind to beat the Islanders because you have to beat down a very tough defensive system. But I think that Bruins Capitals series could just be plain violence. And there's a difference between a very tight checking one goal low scoring game and just a game filled with just violent and huge hits. And so I think that's going to lead in Pittsburgh's favor. Although, like I said, I've been saying this for weeks. The team that worries me the most is Boston. I actually hope that Washington beats the Bruins because I think that the best way Pittsburgh can get out of this division is if we play the Islanders and then the Capitals. I think that the Bruins could very easily beat us and they could get out of the division. I think it's honestly a toss-up, but I do have the Penguins winning in 7 in the second round. So we both have Pittsburgh coming out of the East, but like you said, we'll see who they're going to challenge. Let's switch gears and let's go to the East Division because this is another very interesting division, and we have one series that on paper looks like a mismatch, but maybe it will be a bit closer. And then you have another series that I think is very highly anticipated, particularly in the Southeast United States. You have the Carolina Hurricanes winning the division. And then you have Florida coming second ahead of Tampa Bay in third. Nashville get that 4 spot just ahead of the Dallas Stars, who had a very disappointing campaign not to make the playoffs. So you have Carolina facing Nashville. You have Florida and Tampa in the all-Florida playoff series. The first time that those two teams will meet in the playoffs. Let's start once again with the 1v4, Carolina versus Nashville. Who do you got and why?
I believe you meant to say the Central Division. The
East. Oh, sorry. What did I say? I said East, and we literally just finished the East. Yes,
that's all right. That's no worries. Which division do you have? Which series do we have first? Sorry,
Carolina and Nashville. 1v4.
I think Carolina's going to win this in 5. I really think UC Saros can steal a game, assuming he starts and not Pecorine. Either way, I think Nashville is kind of a pesky team in the sense of they shouldn't have made the playoffs this year, but I call it the UC Saros effect, in which when he's in net, the team plays significantly better in him, kind of like a Jack Campbell situation, which also we'll get to in a bit. But the team seems to play incredible in front of him, and good show for them for Pecorine in their last 5-0 win of the final season. Could be his last game as a Nashville Predator, which would be extremely weird to see. But Carolina just is unbelievable. Like, everything about this team is terrifying. They got 4 lines of unreal power. They have excellent defensemen. Mrazek and Reimer have been lights out. So Rob Brind'Amour should get Jack Adams. In my opinion, I think he's been the absolute best coach of the entire league so far this season. And I think I can see Carolina making it back to the playoffs. At the finals. I can even see them winning the cup this year if they're able to get everything that worked with them so well this season to continue to work in the playoffs. Nashville's going to take a game. They may even take 2, depending on how well the goaltenders play. But I think it's going to be Carolina in 5 or 6 games.
Yeah, I mean, first to start with your point about Saros, absolutely he should be the starter. I think that if the Predators start Rinne, they're making a mistake based on, just those rose-tinted glasses of, this has been our elite goalie for so many years. Saros is the better goalie this season. Saros has been the better goalie definitely in the last month. Saros gives you the best chance to win this series, Saros takes you from like a 0% chance to like a 1% chance. Because like you said, he could realistically steal a game, and that sucks to hear, and that sucks to say, because Rene was such a great goalie. I remember obviously facing him in the Cup final a couple of years ago when it was Nashville versus Pittsburgh. And he was a phenomenal goalie, and that run was an electric run that they had that one year. But Saros has to be the guy. Like you said, they could steal a game, but this is the series where I am most confident in. I think the Carolina Hurricanes sweep this series. Like the Hurricanes, obviously everyone talks about their offense because that's where a lot of their star power is. This Carolina Hurricanes defensive core is unbelievable. Like, they don't really have, I guess Dougie Hamilton is a standout star now that you think about it, but they don't really have like a standout top 5 defenseman in the league type of guy that everyone talks about. Like, they don't have the Cale Makar, they don't have the John Carlson, they don't have the, these types of guys. They have 6 really sturdy defensemen who work really well, like you said, under a very well coached team in Brind'Amour, and obviously the forward score goals, and they have depth scoring. You look at even like Nikash, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. Natchez, there you go. He's been phenomenal this year, leading like depth scoring wise. I don't see a lot of flaws in this Carolina Hurricanes team. I'll talk about it later, but the only thing I think can stop them is just another team that's just absolutely loaded with talent. Unfortunately, the Predators just aren't the same team that they were a couple of years ago. I think this is a sweep for Carolina.
I just think that the Predators are kind of one of those teams that are able to kind of piss you off and maybe frustrate you a little bit, especially with Ekholm and Yossi and the defense. They can definitely frustrate the offense. So I think what they'll be able to do is they'll be able to make Carolina make a mistake, and then they'll win a game that way. But I agree. I think that Carolina is going to comfortably win this series because everything about them is good. Now, one of the most anticipated season series this playoffs, the Battle of Florida, which I'm surprised is like only happening now. We have the Florida Panthers taking on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Labi, your thoughts on this series or what this could mean for the territory of Florida and hockey?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really exciting. I'm glad that this is happening. I'm excited to watch this series. Maybe we'll talk when we're done previewing all of these sort of the series. Obviously, other than Pittsburgh and Toronto as fans of the team, what other series we're looking forward to the most? This is certainly up there for me. And not just because it's the Battle of Florida, more so because this is the best Florida Panthers team in the history of their franchise. And now, granted, that's probably not that much of a compliment considering that their franchise historically hasn't been the best, but this is a phenomenal Florida team. They finally put it together. But Tampa are the defending champions for a reason. Tampa are Tampa. And I don't think people understand the impact of Stamkos and Kucherov coming back. Like you're talking about, this was a Tampa Bay team that was basically keeping pace with Florida and Carolina the entire season without their like 2 best players the entire year. So while I really want to sit here and try to justify why Florida could win this series, and yes, Florida could very much win this series, the reality is, who's Florida's best player? Okay, actually, Florida's best player is Barkov. Who's Florida's second best player? Probably Huberdeau. Who's Florida's best defensive player? Aaron Ekblad. He's injured. Who's Tampa Bay's best players? Kucherov and Stamkos. All signs point to them starting game 1. I think that's the difference in this series. Also, it does go without. It is worth mentioning. I trust Vasilevsky more than I trust Bobrovsky in net. And obviously we look to goalies to potentially be a difference maker in a series. Not saying Bobrovsky couldn't be a difference maker. My point is that it would be very, very difficult for Bobrovsky to play to. He would literally have to post consecutive shutouts in order to like outduel Vasilevsky, because Vasilevsky's a top level goalie, probably going to win the Vezina this year. I really want to say that Florida is going to win, and here's why. But I mean, Tampa and 6. Like, I really can't see them bowing out in the first round. I mean, I guess you can argue that Kucherov hasn't played all year. He'll be rusty. Stamkos is always injury prone. He's not going to be 100%. I can see that. I think Tampa could win this series without Kucherov and Stamkos. So bringing them back, I mean, I have to go Tampa. I'm saying Tampa and 6.
Yeah, I agree with a lot there. I just think we look at Bobrovsky, because you talked about him, how he's not good as good as Vasilevsky, and I would agree with that. But look at the season he had last year. Okay, 2019 compared to this. No, last year before the pandemic hit, he was below 900, right? He was not doing well. He turned it around. Like, he must have done something in the offseason that completely changed the way he's played, how he sees the puck. He's got it figured out. And so I can see the goalie duel being an absolutely outstanding to watch. But Victor Hedman's out. He's been injured for a while. He will not be starting game one. So there's a problem there. Your two best defensemen on both sides are out. You're right. Kucherov and Stamkos are both injury prone, and they haven't played for most of the season. And Barkov, Huberdeau, and that duo is one of the most underrated duos in the league. And people do not give them enough credit. I think Florida, I agree, I do think Tampa will win, but I think Florida's taking it all away. And I think it's going to come down to an overtime game. I really do. And I really think that it's going to be either a bad penalty or an unlucky goal that is the game changer in this series.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last funny point about goaltending, and I mean, obviously Bobrovsky's going to be the game one starter, but when you look at Tampa Bay, there is a 0% chance that Andrei Vasilevsky is not the guy the entire playoff run, no matter what happens. Obviously, barring injury. Assuming Andrei Vasilevsky is healthy, he could give up 5 goals in a game. He's starting the next game. The fact that it's even a possibility that we could see a Chris Dreiger or Spencer Knight in this series, I think speaks to which team has the goaltending advantage. Like, it's Andrei Vasilevsky and it's Andrei Vasilevsky. And now, granted, you can argue that, oh, that's a bad thing, and it's only Andrei Vasilevsky because they only have one goalie. They only need one goalie, realistically. Obviously, if he gets injured, that's a whole other story. But we're assuming that the goalie stays healthy. And yeah, I think, first of all, I think Barkov's finally getting the recognition that he deserves. But I definitely agree, Barkov and Huberdeau for years have been like two of the most overlooked players in the league because they played on a Florida team that was doing badly. And it's so interesting because it's so hard to compare because, like you said, Bobrovsky was awful last season, and the team can be very different to last year's team. But this was a Panthers team last year that was a step behind Tampa, Boston, and Toronto in the Atlantic Division. All these division names are going to be confusing. But last year, Florida was clearly a step behind those 3 teams. And we're still looking at Toronto, Tampa, and Boston this year as being 3 bona fide, solid playoff teams that it's going to take a good team to knock any of those guys out. And like I said, a team can develop over a year, and I certainly think the Florida Panthers are better than they were last year. I see the Florida Panthers as where the Leafs were a couple of years ago, where they were playing Boston that first year in the playoffs, where it was like, we know we're good enough to beat these guys, but we don't really expect to. And I think for that reason, I could very much see Florida winning, but I'm gonna go Tampa. And I can't pick Florida with good conscience. Now, they could do it, and obviously I'll be cheering for Florida in that series. But it's Tampa, man. It's Tampa. They're too fucking good.
But you and I both know defending a championship is one of the hardest things to do in any professional sport.
Absolutely. It's the first round.
I understand. First round, second round. What do you think Pittsburgh, and when they went on for their back-to-back, what do you think, for going for a three-peat, you think people were like, okay, we need to stop these guys right now? Like, Florida's coming out.
Yes, that's
Florida,
true.
Florida is coming out, and no... Go ahead.
No. I mean, the Penguins, when they were like the Penguins, the year after they won back-to-back cups, still made it out of the first round very, very comfortably, and they got knocked out by a Capitals team. That you want to talk about teams that had motivation to win a playoff series? The Washington Capitals, that third year playing Pittsburgh in the second round, that is, you couldn't give a team more motivation. So I definitely hear your argument, and I think that will be very true in the second round, in the conference finals, however far Tampa get. I think in the first round, like, you don't see a lot of former Cup championship teams get knocked out in the first round the year after.
It's obviously not, but it's the whole idea of we can't let these guys do this again to us. We know what they're like, we know what they are. And they played each other so many times this season. That's the thing, is everyone kind of knows what's going to happen in the playoffs. Is it's going to just be like that, but the hitting and the fighting is intensified. I don't know, it's just I don't want to be like, no pun intended, but the Panthers are coming with their fangs out and they want blood. And they want blood. They're sick of being the second they're sick of being the team from Tampa that's the team from Florida that's just never going to get fans, never going to be better than Tampa, all this crap. They're sick of it, and they want to prove everyone wrong.
I'll say this much: Florida went 5-2-1 against Tampa Bay this year.
So
It's definitely possible.
they have a winning record. So let's move on. Let's move on to the next one. I don't want to get too heated on this.
I was going to say, everything that you just said about Tampa being the defending champions and the motivation and wanting to get them out, for me, that's the preview for what I think will be one of the best playoff rounds this year, and I really hope we get it. Carolina, Tampa Bay second round. I think that will be it, because you're talking about a Carolina team that made it to the conference finals last year, right?
The year before that.
Sorry, the year before that. I'm confusing years. Made it to the conference finals. This was a team that was right there. Obviously, Tampa's defending champions. Not saying that they have playoff history, but Carolina is like, where you need to take the next step. The next step is beating the defending champions, and Tampa's there trying to prove that they're still the best team in this division. I think that sort of storyline that you're setting, which is a phenomenal storyline and absolutely true, I think that's really going to show itself in that second round series. I think Carolina, Tampa Bay almost certainly goes 7 and will be some of the best hockey we see in the playoffs. So my question to you is, who gets out of the Central?
I believe, oh man, if Tampa and Carolina play each other, man, that's tough. If Carolina and Tampa play each other, I believe Carolina's coming out of that series. And I believe 5 of those 7 games, if it goes to 7, are going to overtime. Like, though,
Yeah,
if we
I agree with you. It's going to be crazy.
if we were to see a Carolina Tampa second round, my God, that is hockey. That is worth watching, even if you're not even a hockey fan. Let's move to the West now. We got the Vegas Golden Knights and the Minnesota Wild. Labi, who wins how many, and is there a reason as to why they win?
Very quickly, I have Tampa actually coming out of the Central over
Okay.
Carolina, which
All right.
is interesting. But I mean, I mean, I know it's hilarious how quickly reputation can go away, because Tampa were choke artists for years, and then they win one Stanley Cup and everyone's like, oh, they're just fucking loaded. They are, though. They're just so fucking talented. And maybe they'll go right back to choking. Maybe, this was that whole 1 year was just a whole 1 year, and they'll go back to choking and they'll get knocked out in the first round again. I mean, we just don't know, and that's the excitement of playoff hockey. And speaking of the series you just said, I think at the beginning of the season, if you had told me that this was a playoff series, I'd be like, oh, Vegas won their division, Minnesota snuck in as the 4 seed in true Minnesota Wild fashion, and we don't really have to pay attention to this series, Vegas in 4. Then the season happened, and Kirill Kaprizov ended up becoming a fucking savior to the Minnesota Wild.
It also helps that Cam Talbot had above a 920 save percentage in the season.
Oh, absolutely. It goes well beyond just Kirill Kaprizov. Talbot's had a really good year. The Wild have some guys on defense. Like, Jared Spurgeon is a very underrated defenseman.
And they still have Ryan Suter with that Parise deal, and Parise and Suter have seemed to get some sort of renaissance kind of resurrection of youth and speed. It's been absolutely incredible.
Absolutely. Ryan Suter's still a very serviceable defenseman.
Oh, yeah.
He just sucks because of the contract that's attached to him. But yeah, I mean, I would definitely still want a Ryan Suter-like player on my team. And also, you have to speak to the fact, and once again, I'm just throwing out these numbers because they're fun to talk about and they provide, I don't know how much context they provide, but it is worth mentioning that the Minnesota Wild went 5-1-2 against Vegas this year.
Oh my
They
God,
matched
really?
up really well against Vegas. They kept beating them for whatever reason. 5-1-2 this year. Now, I'm still picking Vegas to win this series. I, if I was a Vegas Golden Knights fan, Um, granted, I don't know how many true Vegas Golden Knight fans there are. I mean, shout out to Nevada. Like, if you're from the Nevada, Las Vegas area, like all I know is they love that team, and they've really shown that team like huge. Like, they actually have a very, very passionate local fan base, and so I want to give credit to them for that. But if you're a Vegas Golden Knights fan, or if you're just a bandwagon Vegas Golden Knights fan from anywhere else in the world, which I know I'm not complaining. I love Marc-Andre Fleury. I want to see him do well. I cheer for Vegas on like a lot of the time too. I would be very worried about the threat that the Minnesota Wild pose. Very worried. Now, the thing that Vegas has going for them is that they have the best goalie tandem in the league, and they've given up the fewest goals per game this season. They are a team built for the playoffs. I've been saying this all year. They are perfectly designed to play a low-scoring, tough checking, tight checking, shutdown defense type of style of game. The question is, how will the Minnesota Wild respond to playoff hockey? I'm really interested to see what Kaprizov does. I'm really interested to see how Vegas matches up against the Minnesota Wild in this series. I would be very threatened by what the Minnesota Wild pose. As a guy who's been clowning on them for years, I think they have a very legitimate chance in this series. I'm still going Vegas in 6.
Um, Honestly, watching the Wild, and you've preached it before, was some of the most boring hockey we've ever seen. But holy shit, I loved watching Wild games. They had like 4 games in a row where they tied the game late and they would take it to overtime, and it was exciting hockey, and the fans were allowed back in the stadium, so it just added that extra little, that fun. I'm gonna actually take the Minnesota Wild in this series, especially after the fact that they went 5-1-2. Um, yeah, I'm actually gonna say they take it in 5. And that's a very unpopular opinion because everyone expected Vegas they probably have Vegas making the cup and or winning the cup, but I think Vegas, when it really comes down to it, it's you have a goalie tandem that's extremely good. Who are you starting? You have guys like Marchessault and Smith and Stone and Pacioretty who are, don't get me wrong, they're really good too. However, what is it about Minnesota that they can't win? Like, what is it about them that they just can't get to pass them? Cam Talbot has literally come back from the 2017 Edmonton Oilers and brought back the Minnesota Wild to existence. And oh my good God, it is incredible watching him play. And then they have a good goaltender in what's his name, Lekkonen or something like that. Not Lankinen, but I don't know. He's from Finland. That's all that matters. He's really shown to be quite an excellent addition to that Wild team. I think Kirill Kaprizov, and here's why I think he's been so powerful is because he's had no expectations and no one knows who the hell he was. I didn't know who he was. Vegas didn't know who he was, and now that he's actually tearing the league up, I think he's keeping that going, and I think Minnesota fans are should be stoked for the next 5 years of hockey because Suter, Spurgeon, unreal defensive pair, and then you have Parise, Kaprizov, and you got a bunch of like no names that kind of mix all together. So I'm taking the Minnesota Wild in 5. A lot of people would say I'm crazy, but I don't care. We are amateurs and we're having fun with it.
The thing is, I don't think people should call you crazy if they're calling you crazy with that take. Like, I mean, if you watch the Minnesota Wild play hockey this season, you should be excited about the way that they play, particularly against Vegas this year. I think that the worst thing Vegas could have done was that fuck up that they had with the salary cap where they had to dress 15 skaters in that one game. because it cost them number one. It cost them the President's Trophy. Not that that fucking matters, but it cost them number one in the division. And wouldn't you rather be playing St. Louis right about now than having to match up against the Minnesota Wild? And if
Right now, I would want to play St. Louis over Minnesota.
absolutely, and if you lose to Minnesota, or if you get pushed a lot harder and end up falling to Colorado in round two, a lot of Vegas fans and the organization is going to be looking at how they handled that roster movement, how they handled those games down the stretch, and how they basically choked away number one in the division. Because Vegas had the matchup that they wanted. They had the number one seed. They had the home ice advantage locked up. And the expectation hasn't changed. Vegas's expectation is still to get out of the West. But they're going to have to do it facing a much tougher first-round opponent and without home ice advantage against the Colorado Avalanche if they end up making it to that second round. And so I don't think you're crazy at all for picking Minnesota. I think that this is going to be, this is the series that I'm probably most excited for. Actually, that's a lie. Boston, Washington. This is the series that I'm second most excited for watching, actually, in terms of matchup, Vegas and Minnesota. But moving to the other series, and once again, I mean, I do want to go into every series with sort of equal depth, but I think what I was just saying pretty much sums up how I think Colorado and St. Louis is going to go. Look, St. Louis, you did good to make the playoffs. You did good to recover the second half of the season after the first half of the season was, the least said about that, the better. You guys really struggled in that first half of the season. And while I will give St. Louis credit for turning it around, let's be honest, the real reason that they're the 4 seed is not because they've been particularly great this season. It's because the rest of the teams in your division have been shit. Let's be honest here.
Yeah.
Who are you competing with?
Arizona,
Chicago.
Oh, Chicago. Yeah, you're right.
And San Jose.
No. Arizona, Chicago, and the 3 LA teams.
Oh yeah. LA, you knew were never going to be good this year.
They do have good promise though.
They were like the Ottawa Senators, They wanted, you're going to expect them to take a step forward, but weren't going to be anywhere near the playoffs. You didn't have to worry about, Chicago's not in their division. You didn't have to worry about Anaheim. You didn't have to worry about San Jose. And when your biggest threat is the Arizona Coyotes, the playoffs shouldn't really be in doubt. Which is no disrespect to Arizona, but you're just a much better team. So the fact that for the first 30 games of the season, the St. Louis Blues were worried about making the playoffs, I think that speaks to just how outmatched they're going to be by the Colorado Avalanche in this series. Colorado, the expectation for them is Stanley Cup this year. And I think that
probably for the next 3 or 4.
Absolutely. This is their window. Every year they're going to be expected to be a powerhouse. Every year they're going to be expected to make that run. And I was talking about how Vegas choked their opportunity, they have the easier first round matchup and they'll have home ice advantage in the second round. They need to get out of this division. I have Colorado. I mean, I initially said Colorado in 5 because I don't want to disrespect St. Louis that much, but Colorado sweep realistically.
Yeah, I got 3 words. Binnington is nervous. And Colorado, my God, just won the President's Trophy last night in a commanding 5-1 win over the Kings. Legit don't see anyone beating them. There's just, honestly, to be honest, I could see them getting through this division unbeaten. I don't care who they play in the second round. I can see it happening. This team is unbelievable. Phil Grubauer has really put up a good Vezina kind of trophy caliber of a season. Nathan McKinnon is Nathan McKinnon, Landeskog, Rantanen, and then they brought in Devon Taves. They have Samuel Girard, Cale Makar. There's so much talent on this team. It's ridiculous. And, shout out to Joe Sakic for being one of the best Colorado players and GMs in the franchise, I would argue. Yeah, it's cup bust, man. It's cup or bust this season. I mean, they're not gonna blow everything up after this season, but they got all the keys, man. They got all the pieces. They got everything, I sweep Colorado in 3 because that's possible.
Unfortunately for Colorado, that's not possible because I'm sure they'd love to get out of there even quicker. Um, Now, I think you kind of already answered my question based on what you just said about Colorado, but let's talk about it. Colorado versus, I guess you have Minnesota, but Colorado versus Minnesota or Colorado versus Vegas, you don't think that they're going to be threatened too much. You think Colorado's getting out of this division.
I think Colorado's getting out of this division, and I think they're getting out of it very comfortably. They have their power play is stupid, like stupid good. Like the Leafs is stupid, but that's stupid bad. Like this one is ridiculous. Phil Grubauer is ridiculous. Like Cale Makar is going to be a Norris Trophy candidate this season. He won't win it, but he'll be there. And he'll be the Norris Trophy winner in the next 5 years. Don't mark my words. This team has everything covered. The penalty kill, the power play, the goaltending, the 5-on-5, the 4-on-4, the overtime. Everything about this team is just absolutely incredible to watch. And I don't see a flaw in it. I don't. I mean, I probably because I'm biased, but if you look at everything, they check it off. And sure, yeah, it's
Yeah,
biased,
yeah. I
but I'm
know.
not
I
wrong.
mean, I think that they won the President's Trophy for a reason. They've been the most complete team this season. And that's just, they've been the most complete team this season. Now, at the beginning of the year, when we did our regular season predictions,
Yes.
I mentioned this. About midway through the year, I doubled down on it. And now with my playoff predictions, I'm going to triple down on it, if that's even a saying. Um, I just, and once again, call me biased because Marc-Andre Fleury plays for them. I just think that Vegas is built for the playoffs. And I think that Vegas matches up really well against Colorado.
But they have to get through Minnesota, who has 5 games on them this season.
Very true.
And here's what I can see
Very true.
happening. Vegas loses 2-3 games and it goes to 7. Their confidence is shot because they're expected to do well. Colorado is just too good. It doesn't matter if they go to 7 because people still think that Vegas is better than them, so they don't have to I don't know. I guess it's a bias because I'm a big Avs fan, but Colorado, I just screams Stanley Cup.
They absolutely do. And you're right. Vegas will have a tougher first round matchup. They could potentially get pushed to playing more games, fewer rest, be pushed harder. That will hurt them in the second round. Colorado would have home ice advantage. Everything is favoring the Avalanche. I for whatever reason though, I think that Vegas will do it. I have Vegas getting out of the West. I think they'll beat the Avs in 7. I think that they're designed for the playoffs, the system that they play. Not saying that Colorado's not elite defensively because they have a really elite defensive team. I just I just think that I think Vegas, and I think they speak to it like they allowed the fewest goals against during the regular season. They were playing playoff style hockey a lot of the time in the regular season. I'm I'm picking Vegas to get out of the West. I admit that that's probably a bit of a crazy pick out there, considering that it's very possible that they could get knocked out of the first round, and Colorado look unstoppable. Just like how Carolina, to some extent, will also look unstoppable. But I mean, there's just something about Tampa and something about Vegas where I just think that they'll get it done. And
Listen, I respect your opinion, and you're right. I do think Vegas is playoff built. However, I think because they're playoff built, they're easily rattled. I do. And honestly, to be honest with you, if Vegas gets out, I'll be pissed because the Avs aren't, but they deserve it. The only thing is the defense for the Avs. I think it's going to come down to defense because we know the goalies are about equal, we know the forwards are about equal, but defensively, who can outplay the other? And I think the Avs just have better. Shea Theodore has been absolutely outstanding, but Petrangelo's kind of been a letdown this season, to be honest with you. And if he doesn't figure it out, then they're screwed or they're in big
yeah,
trouble.
Petrangelo has not played up to his potential
No.
this year. That's for sure.
So if I think it's going to come down to whose defense is better and whose special teams is better. And I'm looking at it, and I'm more attracted to the Avs,
No,
biased
for
or
sure.
not.
They're no. I think unbiased, they're definitely the more attractive team to lean towards. And you're very true. I mean, that 5 minute misconduct penalty, like whether it was the right call or not, that meltdown that they had against San Jose should stick in everyone's memory when you talk about sort of Vegas and the pressure of the playoffs. And you're right. I mean, how much adversity does a franchise that has made the playoffs every single season they've been in existence, that has been a Stanley Cup contender every single year that they've been in existence, how much adversity does that franchise really have?
And let me ask you
I
something.
definitely, like, I can see how that would potentially factor in. What were you gonna ask?
What happens when they don't make the playoffs? How will the fan base react? How will the team bounce back the next season?
Definitely. I mean, that's definitely a lot of a much longer term a question to answer it. I think that one of the good things about being a good team, like a bandwagon fans, a lot of positives and a lot of negatives, because you do get the jersey sales and the ticket sales and you get your name talked about and all that's great. But having bandwagon fans can also be bad because, they're not really true fans of the team, and, they'll abandon you once you lose. And I think that Vegas will have their time with that, very, like, when they are not a good team. Although I do have to say, based on how their team is currently constructed, I don't see them struggling anytime in the near future.
No,
But
obviously not. But they
definitely
haven't.
that.
Go ahead.
No, you're right. They definitely haven't struggled, and that will happen. Although, as I said before, I think that like Vegas as a franchise, they're really well run. Like, I don't see any reason why, if they had to rebuild in the future, that they wouldn't be capable of doing it in a strong way. And they have a really strong local fan base. I as much as I guess as a Canadian, I should be very anti a team in Las Vegas because, there isn't a team in Quebec City, for example. But I think Vegas have a strong fan base. They have true fans, and they've gone about it in a very, very, like, great way. And I think they're a great addition to the NHL. And I think that if you hate on Vegas just because they're in Vegas, I don't think you've done enough looking at this team and how they've been constructed and the fans that they have around them. And I think that you might just be a salty Quebecois living in Quebec City, quite frankly. And I mean, Quebec deserves a team. I mean, as much as I joke about loving the Arizona Coyotes and cheering for them as a meme, like, get them out of Arizona. Like, they've shown for the last 12, 15 years that they can't run the organization properly.
But
And
you and I both know they will never move because Bettman screwed up and he doesn't want to look like an idiot.
oh yeah, Bettman has his hands so far up the ass of the Arizona Coyotes that he can talk with their mouth. So they're not moving. But, like, get that team out of Arizona and move them into Quebec City. But anyways, you have Colorado coming out of the division. I have Vegas. Speaking of Canada, let's go to the North Division.
Wow, great
And
transition there, buddy.
thank you.
Attaboy.
And let's talk about what is probably a lot of people's matchup that they're most looking forward to. For the first time in over 40 years, I think it's been, we
Can
get
we?
Toronto, Montreal in the
I'd
playoffs.
actually. Can we talk about the Edmonton Winnipeg first?
Sure. Okay, let's do it. Edmonton versus Winnipeg. Your thoughts on that?
Just because I want to talk a lot about what's going on with Toronto and how their situation is, so I want to save that one kind of for last. Who wins this series? I believe a lot of people might disagree with me. I think the Winnipeg Jets are going to win this series. A lot of people are going to ask, oh, but it's the Edmonton Oilers and it's McDavid and it's Draisaitl and Nugent Hopkins, and I'm like, okay, so who else? Like, who else? Tyson Barrie only has the most points by defender because he's on the power play with McDavid. Like, look at Winnipeg. They have 4 lines of great depth, I would actually say, and they honestly, like, they have a goaltender. Like, I love Mike Smith. He's my favorite goaltender and has been for a long time, but tell me Hellebuck is not going to steal 2 or 3 games in this series. Like, Connor Hellebuck is probably up there again for Vezina this year. I don't know if he'll win it because it's Vasilevsky, but I can see Edmonton taking it to 7, but I see Winnipeg winning this series, Lab.
I should have gone first because now it's not a bold take anymore. Um,
Well, I mean, you can still say it, and it can still be a bold take. A lot of people do believe Edmonton is the better team, but it's hard to say that when they're only a 2-line team.
no, but I mean, yeah. First, to your point, Connor Hellebuck can definitely steal games. I think McDavid has shown that he's just hit another gear this year, where as a player he can steal games. Um, so honestly, I think they kind of neutralize. The Winnipeg Jets have probably been the worst team in the NHL over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Like including like Buffalo, including Detroit, including like they've just been
they've been the most kind of
so
inconsistent.
bad.
Yeah.
But like you said, I mean, if this series was played on paper, or if this series was played where both teams played up to their true potential, I think Winnipeg wins this series pretty comfortably, to be honest with you, based on the talent that Jets roster has. The reality is, can the Winnipeg Jets actually play up to that standard? And like you said, the Edmonton Oilers are a very top-heavy team. In fact, are so top-heavy that there are basically 3 players on that team that matter. In McDavid, Draisaitl, and then their goalie. But the reality is that, do you bet on the full team in Winnipeg who have been playing awful rising to their potential? Or do you bet on the team that, sure, they really only have like 2 offensive guys, but you know for a fact that those 2 offensive guys in a 7-game series could put up 20 points?
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy to say that McDavid could put up, like, realistically, like, this is going way off topic, but let's say the Oilers get knocked out by the Leafs in the second round, because I think that on paper that's probably the most likely thing that's going to happen. Let's say both series go like 6 games. So let's say McDavid plays 12 games in the playoffs. He, in those 12 games, could put up like 30 points and lead the playoffs in scoring, even though a team's going to play 30 games and make it to the finals. And the fact that that's even, like, I wouldn't even say that that's a crazy thing to put. I think that the fact that that's a somewhat reasonable take is insane.
Yeah, no kidding.
And the Jets are going to have to compete with that. The Jets are going to have to compete with, okay, how can we still win a game if one dude puts up 4 points tonight? Because that's what they're going to have to deal with. And I was going to say, in every year, there's always one upset at least, if not multiple upsets. And I think I've picked arguably a couple of upsets, but more so in the second. Like, I think you could call Tampa and Vegas. Like,
before you say your update, let's save that to the end. We'll do like a dark horse update, like stuff.
Right. I just mean like the fact that I have Pittsburgh, Tampa, and Vegas all coming out of the division.
Right.
I think that those would be considered, even though Pittsburgh won their division, so maybe not Pittsburgh. But I still think that Pittsburgh getting out of the East in the playoffs is considered kind of an underdog pick. I think certainly Tampa and Vegas, maybe not Tampa because like dominant, but like I don't know. I feel like those are kind of underdog picks. But there's always going to be one upset in that first round. And I think everyone's talking about Minnesota. It could be Minnesota. I think it could be Winnipeg because they could play up to that potential. But I mean, I just look at that, the way the Jets have been playing, and maybe I'll watch a bit of their game against the Leafs tonight.
I'm not watching it because it means nothing.
It actually is important for Toronto, because it's actually important for Toronto and Winnipeg in terms of seeding for the Final Four. If Toronto wins the game, they're the 4 seed out of the 16 in the playoffs. If they lose, they're the 5 seed.
Like, so, at the end of the day, I'll watch the highlights, but I won't watch the
You're right. It's really not that important. I mean, technically there is some importance to it. It's not a meaningless game, but like, yes,
but
you're right.
Like, you're digging for that.
Very much digging for that. But I mean, I think that Winnipeg's performance tonight is going to be very interesting. I really want to pick Winnipeg because I can see them pulling the upset. But I mean, you want to talk about narratives. This Oilers narrative of, you gotta win. You like the team has to accomplish something. Like McDavid has to accomplish something. And sure, is it a bit harsh to judge a player based on his team's success? Yes. Is it what we do for every single athlete, no matter what sport they play, for all of human history? Yeah, it's what we've done. Crosby got shit for only winning the one cup with Pittsburgh up until the back-to-back cups. Ovi got shit for not having won a cup until he did in 2018. It's what we do to players.
Yeah.
It's what we do. And so, yeah, McDavid's only 24. Well, Crosby won the Stanley Cup in his age 23 season. So McDavid, the pressure's really starting to come to McDavid on the playoff side. And he's got to show up this season, and I think he will. And for that reason, I think Edmonton will at least win the first round. But I mean, you saying Winnipeg, like I can see it. I can see it so clearly because I know how Edmonton work in the playoffs. They lost to Chicago last year.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. This is probably going to be a hot take, but I think Mike Smith has been the most valuable player on the Edmonton Oilers. Everyone knew McDavid.
No. I mean, no.
Hold up.
No.
Let me explain. Everyone knew McDavid was going to light it up. He's done this before. Now you put him in a division where he's playing the same teams 8 times, and everyone knew he was going to. I knew he was getting above 80 points this season. I could tell you that at the beginning of the season. The reason why they're in the spot they are right now is because of Mike Smith. When he came back from injury, he won them 7 games in a row. And he's been their best goaltender. And you guys both know that without goaltending, you cannot even get close to winning a game. So, would you rather have Mike Smith or Mikko Koskinen? You and I both know the answer to that one. And
I'd rather have Connor McDavid and Mikko Koskinen in net. I'll tell you that. Look,
no,
I
because
get what you're saying. I get what you're saying, and I'll give you Mike Smith as this. I'll give you Mike Smith over Draisaitl in terms of most valuable player this season. But it's McDavid because sure, like everyone said, oh, I knew he would get 80 points. I think that the thing is, people were joking about, oh, haha, is Connor McDavid going to hit 100 points this year? And then he did it in 53 games. Like, I don't think anyone was actually serious about McDavid hitting 100. And then he just did it with 3 games to spare and has been absolutely... And it goes more than the points. Like, I think, actually, the thing that I respect McDavid the most about this year is he's become a better defensive player. Not by much, but he's become a better defensive player. And I think that he will realize, along with the Oilers, that he's going to have to stop these 4-point nights, and he's going to have to start playing a more complete 200-foot game, especially with the speed he possesses. Like, and once again, I'm not here to criticize McDavid because best player right now in hockey deserves MVP this year. But if you asked Connor McDavid, would you rather have 105 points this year and getting bounced in the first or second round, or would you rather have 80 points this year, 75 points this year, and have more defensive responsibilities, but the whole team elevates itself as a result? And I think that the next 5 years of McDavid's career is going to be very interesting because in a full 82-game year, McDavid could flirt with 150-point seasons if he really wanted to. Realistically, if McDavid started like cherry picking, only focused on offense, only focused on putting up points, I think if he really only focused on offense, he could hit 2 points per game if he really committed to it.
That sounds like some Phil Kessel talk right there, just cherry picking.
Right, but the reality of the situation is there's a lot more to hockey than just scoring goals and just putting up points.
Obviously.
Like, especially as a center, like Ovechkin to some extent can sit in his spot and wait for the puck to come to him because as a winger you have a lot less defensive responsibility. If you're going to be a centerman, you have to play a 200, especially in today's NHL 2021, you have to play a 200-foot game. And I'm not saying McDavid doesn't. I'm actually commending him. I think his defensive performance this year has gotten a lot better. I'd like to see him stop with the like take a foot off the gas with scoring and offense and commit more to the defensive side. And a lot of that blame goes to the Oilers because they literally don't have anyone else who could score goals. So McDavid has to be that guy. But yeah, I mean, I just, for that reason, I don't like this Oilers team is not built for the playoffs at all. Like if I look at the teams that made the playoffs, and you were to tell me pick the team that looks the most out of place as a playoff team with respect to style, it's the Oilers by a mile. Like, wouldn't you
Well,
agree with that?
I mean, yeah, but agree to disagree, man. Like I told you, it's a hot take. People can argue. Got you talking for sure. That's yeah. At the end of the day, you're right. They're not really built for the playoffs without guys like that. So there's not much I can really argue about that because it's the truth.
All right, let's hear your Leafs talk.
Oh well, I have to say, I think Winnipeg's gonna win in 6 games.
Yeah, so you said Winnipeg in 6. I have Edmonton in 6, but I can see the Winnipeg Jets winning. Like I can see
Like
it.
you can see in both cases, you can see it going either way. Like
Oh,
both of us can be
absolutely.
wrong, and both of us
Absolutely.
can be right. Yeah.
I could see it going either way. I'm gonna lead McDavid at least in the first round, where he's not playing the strongest team. Leafs talk.
Leafs talk. Leafs are winning this series pretty comfortably, probably in 5 games because they'll probably be up in the series 2-3-0, and then they'll just be a little lazy and lackadaisical, and Montreal steals a game, and we're like, well, let's not do that again. You know what I find really interesting? Jack Campbell's starting tonight. Do you think the Leafs have already decided on who's starting the goaltender? Don't you think Freddie should get another game if he's going back in net for the playoffs? Like,
I agree with you with respect to I think Freddie should get the start tonight.
I think he
I
should, but
think that
he's not though. Oh yeah, you.
No, I agree with you. He should get the start tonight, but he's not. I think though that if you don't think Jack Campbell should be the starting goalie in Game 1, you're crazy. And I'm not talking to you. I'm talking about Leafs fans. Like Leafs
Yeah, no,
fans,
obviously.
if you don't think Jack Campbell is the starter in Game 1, he's the starter. Like he's the starter in Game 1. He's been your best goalie this year. Anyways, just answering your questions. I'll mute my mic for the next 5 minutes. Let you talk about the Leafs.
All right. So what's the biggest problem with the Leafs right now? It's their power play. Their defense is outstanding. TJ Brody was absolutely what the Leafs needed. Dermott's played well. Hall has really turned into a great defenseman, probably the most improved player on the Leafs this season. No complaints. Like Riley's still Riley, absolutely insane. Yeah, they make a few mistakes. It just can they recover? I'm so sorry, Montreal, but it's going to be a very, very unfun, not happy playoff series for you. I'm sorry, but you're going up against the Toronto Maple Leafs and Austin Matthews, who we talk about great accolades, 41 goals in like 50 games, which is stupid ridiculous. And he's missed games too, so he could have been a goal per game kind of guy had he not missed so many games. I believe Freddie will get the start. I have a $10 wager with a guy from school, so I'm kind of hoping that in a sense. I do believe Jack should get the start. And you're right, 17-3-2. He can go 18-3-2 tonight. He's been lights out, and I am so proud of him. He's been a backup his entire life. He's never really had an opportunity. He has no playoff experience. And that's why I think Freddie's going to get the start. Because he has that playoff experience. Because he's been in the playoffs. He's been deep in the playoffs. Maybe not with the Leafs, but with Anaheim. And this is his last hurrah. Like, he's going to walk after the season because the Leafs, A, can't afford him, and B, don't want to afford him because he's just not playing very well. The big factor is Matthews and Marner, who's sitting tonight because they don't need to play him. And the secondary scoring. Joe Thornton needs to play his veteran leadership. Him and Spezza need to get some goals. Wayne Simmons got to fight some people. Like there's a lot of different things that need to happen with this team for them to have a successful playoff series. And I think they're going to hit everything there. I think the Leafs are going to. I think the Leafs are coming out of the East. I think they're going to beat Pittsburgh because I have Pittsburgh coming out. I'm sorry, it's just how it is. I'd like to hear your opinion on that after because you're a big Pens fan, big Penguins guy. Yeah, I think the Leafs are going to comfortably win the series, and I don't think there's going to be much of a challenge. I think Montreal is going to win a game, but I think that's it. Like, I don't think Montreal even touches 2 games, and I think the Leafs are going to dominate them in the 3-4 games that they actually beat them. Labi, question for you: who is going to win this series?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with a lot of what you said there. Um, Look, it's very obvious that Toronto is the most dominant team in this division. It's very obvious that Toronto needs to come out of this division. It's very obvious that if Toronto does not win the first 2 rounds in the playoffs, it will be a disaster, and it will be a very interesting time to be living in Toronto, um, and to be a fan of the Leafs. Toronto versus Montreal, however, like I think people need to sort of realize what we will be experiencing come Thursday night.
Oh, it's
Which,
gonna be
first
so
of all,
fun.
the fact that game one isn't until Thursday, like, what the fuck is this playoff schedule? Literally, like, I think most other series will be on like game three by then, but that's a whole other thing. Um, this is the first time, like, Toronto and Montreal are arguably the two biggest franchises in the NHL. Arguably the two most historical, the two most
Well,
important.
I mean,
Obviously, like, you have the Bruins, you have the Rangers, you have the Red Wings, but like statistically, they're definitely there.
statistically, they're number 1 and 2 in terms of Stanley Cup wins.
Yeah, I mean, historically, they're like two original six teams. They're like right there. Now, this is the first time they'll be meeting in the playoffs in over 40 years. I don't know the exact year.
79 was the last time they played.
There you go. So 42 years ago. Quick maths.
Wow, look at you, buddy.
I just did 9 to 1 is 2 because I knew
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
40.
Okay,
I knew it was
okay.
40
Thanks a
something.
lot. Whatever. Keep talking.
I swear I'm smart. But yeah, the first time in 42 years, like, that's important. Like, first time in our lifetimes that we'll be seeing Toronto and Montreal in the playoffs.
Yep.
I don't even like I I'm trying to hype up how important this is, and even I won't fully recognize how big a deal this is until they actually step onto the ice. And I think that that's going to be a factor. And I think that that's a negative to Toronto, because I think if this is Toronto Winnipeg, then this is just a straightforward first round playoff series against a team that you're expected to win if you're Toronto. The fact that it's Toronto Montreal becomes the rivalry between these two teams on top of everything else. And that's only going to be detrimental to Toronto. Now, Toronto have been so dominant this year that that really shouldn't hurt them that much. But I'll say this. If Montreal wins game one, that's going to really make things interesting for a whole lot of reasons. One, you have the whole Toronto chokes in the playoff storyline. Two, you have the whole, once again, don't know how much home ice is going to matter, especially in the North where there's no fans, but you have the whole, now Toronto needs to win just to get the split on home ice. Then you have the whole, okay, well, do we stick with Jack Campbell in game two? Do we go to Freddie Anderson in game two? If Montreal wins game one, this is a series. If Toronto wins game one, this isn't a series. That's like that. I know I'll give you a legitimate prediction. That's my prediction. I think if Montreal wins game one, this is going to be, this could go very badly for the Leafs. If Toronto win game one, they'll be able to be a lot more calm. They'll recognize that even though this is Montreal in the playoffs, this is a team that we've already beat 7 times this year, I believe. Yeah, 7-2-1 this year against Montreal, and it will calm those nerves. If they lose game one, I can see this team getting very panicky. With that being said, the additions of Spezza, the additions of Thornton, that's going to go a long way in terms of calming the nerves of this team down and really helping them when they face adversity. So, despite everything I just said, no matter what, I think the Leafs win this series. But I think that if Montreal wins game one, this could go 6 or 7. I think that if Toronto wins game one, this is a 4 or 5 game series. Either way, I think Toronto win. But, I mean, there's still a part of me that's like, well, if Montreal win game one, Toronto panic, the series kind of becomes a little bit more balanced. If they steal another game and then push it to 7 somehow, something about Toronto-Montreal Game 7 doesn't feel like Toronto would win that in my mind. The question is, can Montreal get there? And I don't think they can. So I'm still going Toronto. But what I will... So I know I'm kind of just talking about a whole lot of hypothetical scenarios. But essentially what I'm saying is I think Toronto wins the series, but they really need to win Game 1 to make things a lot easier for them. And if it goes to Game 7, I think Montreal wins Game 7. If it gets to a Game 7, but I don't think it will.
Well, 7-2-1 on the season.
Yeah, Toronto is 7-2-1.
You did say a lot of hypotheticals, and here's where I think you're wrong. I do not think the Leafs will panic. I think with having Sheldon Keefe and Jack Campbell in there, if assuming Jack Campbell does start, it's a calming nerve. And we brought in Nick Foligno for this reason to add some grit. And like you said, Joe Thornton, Jason Spezza, players who are meant to calm the nerves of the young guys who aren't so young anymore. Matthews is like 24, 23, 24. He's been in this position. He's been clutch when he needs to be. Yeah, I know they haven't won one in since 2004, but I don't think they're going to get nervous. I think they know how good they are. I think they know that. And I don't think they're going to choke. I think of all years to get to the Stanley Cup and win it, it has to be this one.
It definitely has to be this one, and I agree with everything that you've said. I think that the one missing link there is even if the team internally doesn't freak out initially, you know who will freak out? The media. If Montreal win Game 1, you know what the storyline's going to be for the next 2 days? Oh, the Leafs are choking. Leafs are choking in the playoffs again. Oh, which goalie do you start? Let's have a 15-minute TSN segment about which goalie you would start and bring in 75 analysts from all over the country to talk about. And yeah, we know Winnipeg and Edmonton are playing a playoff series, but Toronto lost Game 1. And you know that that's what TSN will do because that's what they always do with the Leafs. And I honestly think that that's a curse. The best thing that happened to Phil Kessel was he went from having to answer 75 media press conference questions after every single Leafs practice to going to Pittsburgh and hardly anyone wanted to ask him questions because he was the 5th guy on the team. There's something about that media in Toronto where if the series even starts to look like it could get out of hand, the media will snap. And you're right. I definitely think that Spezza, Thornton, I didn't even think about Nick Foligno because I forgot you guys had him, traded for him. I absolutely think that that will help stabilize that media effect, and it won't have the same impact that it had, insert year they played Boston. But the media are still going to roll with that if they get the chance to. And so that's why I think that Game 1 is so important. Because if Toronto wins Game 1, the media doesn't even get the chance to roll with that. Because if Toronto wins Game 1, the storyline the next day is, wow, how great were the Leafs in that win? And wow, maybe Campbell is the right guy. Instead of all of these spiraling questions about how the Leafs are going to choke even though there's only been one game played.
It sets a narrative.
Exactly. It sets the narrative. And the only way that the Leafs can control the narrative with the Toronto sports media is by winning games. Because even if there's the tiniest little speck of uncertainty, the media will jump on it and rip it apart, and they will run miles with it. Because I've seen it happen every single year that the Toronto Maple Leafs have done anything. And that's unfortunately the reality of trying to be a successful hockey team in the city of Toronto. And it's something that the Raptors don't have to deal with. It's something that the Blue Jays don't have to deal with. Unfortunately, it's something that the Toronto Maple Leafs have to deal with.
And you know what? If I'm Sheldon Keefe, if I'm Austin Matthews, you guys lose Game 1, it's whatever, you lost the game. I say fuck the media. Fuck what they have to say. They're not out there 60 minutes a game putting their ass on skates, hitting each other at speeds that can reach up to 40 kilometers, which we've seen. I think they look at the media and they're like, these guys are a bunch of dumbasses. Steve Simmons said William Nylander was an IKEA thing. And then Nylander went on a fucking tear.
Yeah, Steve Simmons is a clown, but you're right. The best thing that Austin Matthews can do right now, actually not right now, but the best thing Austin Matthews can do Wednesday night is turn off his phone, delete his Twitter, delete his Instagram for the entire playoffs, because that you don't realize how much that will help his headspace. Like the entire Leafs team need to go on a social media blackout during this run because, like Jacob, you know because you're part of it. Just how, like, there's hockey Twitter and then there's Leafs Twitter,
It's
and
you know what? It's ridiculous.
it is the most toxic place. Like, and cause this is coming from a Penguins fan, and I recognize how toxic my own fan base can be. Like the Leafs Twitter is just a whole nother level of toxicity that I've never seen before.
It's you know what? Like, and thank God I'm not one of those. Yeah, sure, I'll shit on the team, but I won't like go out of my way and personally attack the players. I'll be like, oh man, these guys suck. Like, oh, I hate this team. Like, I'll say stuff like that, but I'll never give up on the team because I know they're a good team. But it's the media, really, like we said, it sets the narrative, and it doesn't help when you got guys out there personally attacking these millionaire players who are literally just going out there and doing like they're doing their best. So what? Matthews didn't score. Are you gonna make a whole book about it? Like, so what? You're right. It is toxic, and it's unfortunate because the Leafs are a really good hockey team, and if they weren't in Toronto, they wouldn't get the hate, and they'd probably be a team like Florida that kind of went under the radar, did very surprisingly well, and now is a good chance because no one's really paying attention. It's fucking annoying, and it sucks because being from Toronto, people assume, oh, you're one of those Leaf fans. Like, no, we're not. But it's just the Leaf fans that do speak up are the ones who say the stupidest shit.
Yeah, no, for real. Take Steve Simmons' platform away from him.
Yeah,
But
that guy
despite
needs to like. He doesn't deserve to have a job.
no,
Do you remember last year when Matthews called him out because Simmons made a stupid ass article on him?
yeah, I'm glad he finally did. That guy is like,
That guy's a
anyways.
dumbass. He doesn't know
So
what. Sorry, go ahead. I'm done. I'm done.
no, that's fine. I'm all here for Steve Simmons slander. So, despite all of that, I think we both still have the Leafs coming out of the North.
Yeah, like especially like you said, if the Oilers beat the Jets, the Leafs suffocated the Oilers and only put McDavid to 1 point in 3 games. Like, yeah, I can see the Leafs doing that all over again.
I would love to see the Leafs, the Oilers in the second round. I think that would be a great series. I think if you're the Leafs, you obviously hope you play Winnipeg. I don't think Winnipeg stands a chance against Toronto, where at least Edmonton have a McDavid who can steal games here and there. And also,
I don't think it matters either way. I think Toronto's coming out of this division.
Oh, you're right. Toronto absolutely should, but from a style perspective, I think that the Leafs could get dragged into a track meet type of series with Edmonton. And from a neutral perspective, the thing that I would love the most is if Toronto and Edmonton met in the second round, the Leafs got dragged into playing that type of, we're just going to try to outscore you, and every game's like a 6-5, and you'll have like Matthews with a hat trick, and the next game McDavid has like 5 points, and that would be so fun to watch, but that would really hurt the Leafs' chances if the Leafs just try to play, like if the Leafs play a tight checking style of play against the Oilers will not have a chance. But yeah, I think we both have Toronto getting out of that division. And so, to avoid trying to go too long into this talk, we now have the 4 teams. And like we said, unfortunately, with the way that the system works with the playoffs this year, we won't know whether what we're about to talk about will actually end up happening because there's reseeding after the 4 teams get out of their divisions. So for me, I have Vegas and Tampa would be playing against each other, the 2 versus the 8, and I would have Toronto and Pittsburgh playing each other. Toronto has either the 4 or the 5, depending on their game against Winnipeg. Pittsburgh has the 6. Now, you would have a different matchup. You would have Colorado versus Pittsburgh. Colorado is the 1, Pittsburgh is the 6, and then you would have Carolina as the 3 taking on Toronto as either the 4 or the 5.
Oh my god.
Those are very different playoff series. So I'll go over mine quickly. I have Pittsburgh facing Toronto. Now, this would be a lot of fun for us to cover because me being a Penguins fan, you being a Leafs fan, Um, I would fear for my safety as a Penguins fan living in Toronto if this series happened and if Pittsburgh won. Um, let's just say I'll be thankful for Doug Ford's lockdowns if Pittsburgh knocks the Leafs out of the playoffs.
Labi, if
Um,
Pittsburgh knocks Toronto out, I will stop cheering for Toronto entirely and cheer for Pittsburgh.
there you go. You heard it here first. I have Pittsburgh winning this series. Um, just because, well, there's a lot of factors. I don't want to get into it too much, but I think the team that comes out of the East is going to be the most prepared for the final two rounds of the series, just because it'll be a dogfight from day one, and that team will be rolling. Whichever team comes out of the East, they will be rolling and firing on all cylinders. And I think that the Leafs, even though, like, I'm not saying that they won't get tested, and I'm not here to continue the narrative about, oh, the North Division sucks. Like, these teams are still NHL teams. Like, literally, the best player in the world plays in the North Division, and the Leafs are probably going to have to get through him.
Do you want to know something?
Yeah.
How many points did you get off the Buffalo Sabres and New Jersey Devils this year?
Well, that's the other thing. That's a very fair assessment. Very fair assessment.
No, I'm not taking away from Pittsburgh's success, but I'm just saying if you're going to talk about how bad the North was.
No, absolutely. There were bad teams in every division. And I'm pretty sure we went 7-1 against Buffalo this year. So you're absolutely right.
Ridiculous.
And I think we also went 7-1 against New Jersey. Although maybe 6-2. The point is we won a lot of games. But yeah, I just think that if it's Pittsburgh Toronto in the conference finals, that Pittsburgh team will be the best possible version of themselves, and that because they'll have to be to get out of the East, and Toronto could still coast out of the North. And for that reason, I think Pittsburgh would just be in a much better place to start. And I think that, and I said it before, so I'm not going to mention it again, but I think that in order for Toronto to have the best chance at success, they really need to start strong in the series. And so I think that if Pittsburgh was to play Toronto, I think Pittsburgh would win game one because they would just be in better game shape and be the much more dominant team. And I think that that would really help them and hurt Toronto as the series went on, where I think that Pittsburgh would be able to get it done. And I have Pittsburgh in 6 in that situation. And then for me on the other side, between Vegas and Tampa Bay, I mean, I talk about how great that Vegas style is and how I think it will be enough to get them past Colorado. There's just, like, that Tampa Bay team is just too fucking good. They're just too fucking good. I have Tampa Bay. So I have Pittsburgh, Tampa Bay in the finals for me. So switching over to you, you would have Colorado versus Pittsburgh and then Carolina against Toronto.
Yeah. Oh, man. So
say Colorado Toronto finals because I know you want to.
I want to, but let's look at it. Carolina and Toronto. Realistically, Carolina would win that. They have, I don't know. Their coaching. I don't want to say Sheldon Keefe is a bad coach, but Ron Brindamore, man, like, holy shit, he's done some incredible stuff with that team. Yeah, I want to say Toronto, Colorado, and Toronto finals, and then I'd be torn. I would win and lose at the same time. Man, I don't know. I mean, I do think Colorado's going to come out of that series. I don't think there's going to be much. I honestly don't think there's going to be too much of a fight there. But Toronto and Carolina, I can honestly see it's going to be either a blowout for one team or another, or it's going to 7 games and all of them are going to overtime. Like, there's not much to say about it. That's what I believe is going to happen. And yeah, I think Toronto, you think Pittsburgh's going to win the cup. I think Toronto's going to win the cup. And maybe we're wrong. Maybe we're right. Maybe there are better options out there. But we believe in our team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, although, it's also good to be reasonable, and I like that you're giving that take. And, I'm not going to sit here and try to argue for Pittsburgh over Colorado. I think Colorado would be the safe pick there. Not saying that I don't think Pittsburgh could do it, because I think they could. But my point is, when I see Pittsburgh versus Toronto, I actually, unbiasedly believe that Pittsburgh would win that series. Where if I see Pittsburgh versus Colorado, I think that I want Pittsburgh to win, and I think they could do it. But obviously, I think from an unbiased perspective, Colorado would get would be the favorite in that series. And so I will say this: in the scenario where Pittsburgh comes out of the East, but doesn't play Toronto, and so what I mean by this is Tampa Bay is actually ranked below Pittsburgh in terms of the seeding because they're the 8th seed and Pittsburgh is the 6th seed. So if Florida or Carolina come out of the Central instead, then it would be Pittsburgh against Colorado or Vegas. And I think that Pittsburgh would have a much tougher time in that series. And so I do want to say that the reason I'm picking Pittsburgh to make the finals is because with the picks that I have, they go through Toronto and they don't go through Colorado, Vegas, or any of those, or Carolina or Florida. And I think that it's because of that I have them in the finals, where if they were playing Colorado, Vegas, Carolina, or Florida, I think that they would have a much tougher time. I just think that with the way the seeding goes and the way I think the playoffs are going to go unravel, they get to avoid those teams. Which and I think for you, the good thing about Toronto's seeding is they're above every single team in the East Division. So no matter who comes out of the East, if Toronto comes out of the North, they will avoid Colorado or Vegas, which I think is a huge plus for Toronto.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really not okay. I'm really terrified of Colorado. Like, I know why. Like, it's good to be a fan of them, but holy shit, they are such a good team. Like, I don't want to touch anyone from the West, but I know we're gonna have to in the finals. So, it's okay to have different opinions, and it's good to back up your opinions as to why. So, may the best team win. Good luck to all of them, and there's opportunities for everyone.
Yeah, so then that leads to the big question at the end, and obviously, like we said, we'll do predictions for each round as it goes forward. But for now, that we sit here at about 8:30 on Friday night when this is being recorded, about 24 hours, just less than 24 hours away from the start of the playoffs, I have Pittsburgh, Tampa in the finals. You have Colorado, and are you saying Carolina or are you saying Toronto?
I am going with Toronto, who
Okay,
are
so
who
there
are
you
currently
go.
leading 1-0 against the Jets.
There you go. So who wins the cup, Colorado or Toronto?
Colorado. It hates to. I hate to say it. It's Colorado.
You're going Colorado in 7 then?
Yeah.
There you go. And you talk about how tough it is to win back-to-back cups. I am saying that the team that last win back-to-back cups prevent Tampa Bay from going back-to-back. Completely unbiased opinion. Pittsburgh wins the finals over Tampa in 6.
Well, wouldn't
That's
that be fucking great, huh?
that's my pick. And then because I have Pittsburgh winning, I have Crosby's the Conn Smythe because realistically, who else are you going to give it to? I'm
Yeah,
assuming
yeah.
if you have Colorado, you're going McKinnon.
No, I'm actually gonna go Rantanen. I think he's gonna do extremely well for the Avalanche. And I don't want to. I'm nothing against McKinnon, but I think Rantanen has just been on another level this year.
Yeah, no, he has been phenomenal. So there you go. There's our picks. So just to go over everything again, I have Penguins and I have Pittsburgh, Boston, Toronto, Edmonton, Tampa Bay, Carolina, Vegas, and Colorado, with Pittsburgh eventually winning the cup. Well, Jacob has Pittsburgh, Boston, Toronto, Winnipeg, Florida, you said? Or did you say Tampa?
Yep.
You went.
I said Florida.
You said Florida. Yeah, Florida, Carolina, Minnesota, and Colorado, with Colorado winning the Stanley Cup. And yeah, so I know we're already going pretty long, but we kind of expected this one to go a bit longer. And so I will finish with asking you this question. Outside of these sort of predictions that we made on what we think will happen, what is one underdog dark horse team that you have your eyes out set on, and what is one team who maybe a lot of people are assuming will do really well this year who you don't have trust in? So what's one team you think could be a dark horse, and what's one team you think will flop?
I think one dark horse team that you can really watch out for is the Nashville Predators. And yes, we know they're overrated, blah blah blah. But Minnesota's not a dark horse team anymore. Like Minnesota has really proven um, better, like really proven that they can be an actual team this year. So I think Carolina is going to win that series, but I still think Nashville is a team that can give them a really, really tough time. And a team that everyone expects to do really well, but probably will fizz out. It's probably the Washington Capitals. I think they're just going to go back to choking.
Yeah, no, I think those are pretty good picks. In order to be different, I'll give a couple of different options. For me, the team that I think could really be a dark horse team are the New York Islanders. Um, and I
But
say that
that's a great team to pick.
I say that fully expecting Pittsburgh to win the series. And once again, I'm literally picking them to win the Stanley Cup. I do have faith in the Penguins, but I think this East is so balanced where, I mean, I don't just think that the Islanders could pull, like, the Islanders could come out of the East. They really could. And I really think that they're the only 4 seed that I could say that and truly mean it. Montreal doesn't have a shot. Nashville doesn't have a shot. St. Louis doesn't have a shot. You talked about Nashville being a dark horse, and I agree with you in the sense of I could see them challenging Carolina a lot more than people will give them credit for. But when I look at those 4 seeds and I think, well, which one of these teams could come out of the division, the only team that really sticks out to me are the New York Islanders. And then in terms of a team that I think are maybe people are sort of overhyping them. Um, oh, this is gonna sound harsh, and so to make it sound less harsh, I'll group them together. But I'm gonna say the Leafs and Oilers in the North.
Wow.
Because, well, and here's the thing. I think because it's the North Division and it's clear that Toronto and Edmonton are steps above Winnipeg and Montreal, at least on paper, and Toronto's even a step above Edmonton on paper. Everyone expects everyone expects Toronto and Edmonton to just waltz through the first round and then Toronto to waltz through the second round. And I don't think it's going to be as easy as some people are saying it is. So I'm not sitting here saying that they're going to choke necessarily, because I still think that Edmonton will do enough to win the first round. Toronto will do enough to get out of the division. There are people who are probably going to go out here and say, "Oh, Leafs sweep, Leafs sweep," and they are definitely talented enough to do that. I have zero faith in the Leafs sweeping a playoff series. I think that they will win the series, but I think it will be a lot closer and a lot tougher than people think it is. And same thing for Edmonton. We literally sat here and talked about how Winnipeg could win the series, and I mean, I think that that's very true. So I think that you might hear a lot of talks about, and I'm sure there will be a lot of, reporters and a lot of analysts. Now, granted, a lot of reporters and analysts much more qualified than I am, but a lot of reporters and a lot of analysts saying Leafs in 4, Leafs in 5, Oilers in 4, Oilers in 5. And I just think it's going to be a lot tougher than that for those guys.
Yeah, it may be tougher, but I don't think they're the most overrated team in this entire series. I think it's hard to say they're overrated when they made the playoffs like everyone else. So
Exactly. And I mean, Washington was taken because you said them, so.
you can say the Caps. I'm totally cool with it. I hate them, so
The thing is, I wouldn't even consider them overrated because from what I hear from everyone, Boston's favorites to win. Even though Washington's the 2 seed, everybody I'm hearing talking about the series has the Bruins as the favorite, and so, I mean, maybe that in itself shows that Washington are overrated as a 2 seed. But yeah, I feel like I feel like the public consensus is that Boston's going to win the series.
I mean, I would love to see Boston win the series. I think goaltending is definitely on Boston's side.
I mean, once again, I'd love to see Washington win the series because I'd really rather avoid Boston. And once again, not disrespecting any teams, but I think that if Pittsburgh went Islanders, Capitals, Leafs in the first 3 rounds of the playoffs, not disrespecting those teams, not saying it's going to be easy, but I think that's a very convenient path for them to take, and I think it's a path that suits them very well.
And that's a good way to end, don't you think?
Yeah, so I was going to say thank you guys for listening to our Stanley Cup playoff preview. So
One
yeah,
one question.
I'm sure we will refer to a lot of points along the last hour and a half or so to show where we went right. Probably a lot more likely where we went horribly wrong. And yeah, keep tuning into the Benchwarmers Sports Talk podcast to follow everything that goes on throughout the playoffs. We'll also talk about some other sports that's going on as well. I'm sure we'll talk about some NBA playoffs as those will start up not too long from now either. But yeah, until then, enjoy the playoffs, and we will be back next week. Thank you very much for listening, and see you next week.